Good evening, viewers. Good evening, the audience here. My name is Edla Kaumbi, and I am the Executive Director of the NICG, Namibia Institute of Corporate Governance. And I'm joined in the studio by John Pallet, is that how you say it?
Good
And
evening.
James Newpe.
That's exactly how.
And all the M and the N and the Y is all in there.
Good evening.
All right, yeah. Thank you for joining us. This is our first series for the year with Fireplace Conversations. And tonight we are talking about the E of ESG. Those of you who follow Fireplace Conversations will remember that last year Venture started by talking about ESG. And so we talked about ESG in general, but we want to focus it a little bit this year. And so we want to talk about the E tonight, and then the next Thursday, we're going to talk about S. So yeah, we're going to start us off. And so to remind you, those of you who haven't heard, I'm sure you have, but really ESG has to do with how organizations are responsible and sustainable in the way that they do business. So we want to focus more on the E tonight, like how are they responsible? Are they recycling all of those things? As a country, how are we doing? So just maybe to start us off, James, just to tell us a little about who you are, why you're here, and
Amazing. So I'm James Newpe. I guess I'm here because you invited me to, which is great. But at the moment, I guess my roles are, I sort of advise the president on economic matters. I also sit on a few advisory boards, and then I'm also the country's green hydrogen commissioner. And so I suppose given that portfolio of roles, I think about the E a lot more offensively than defensively, and we can talk about what that means for me. But yeah, this is what I do, and I think I enjoy it a lot, actually. That's why I was very happy to come here, even on short notice.
I'm so grateful.
That's
really happy. This man drove all the way from Rotterdam. Hopefully you didn't get any speed.
No. Thanks.
So John, tell us a little bit about you and your involvement with the environment.
Okay, I'm John Pallet. I'm an environmental consultant. I've been involved in environmental work all my life. I've lived here for more than 35 years. So I'm here representing the environmental sector and also the Namibian Environment and Wildlife Society, which is one of the old NGOs, environmental NGOs in Namibia.
Thank you so much. And for the viewers, we actually have a small audience here, and I'm really happy. I hope you guys are sending positive vibes. This is our first series for the year. So let's just get right into it.
Sure.
James. I'm going to ask you, in terms of environmental strategy, how should companies integrate environmental strategies into their overall business strategy to ensure long-term sustainability?
Sure. So I mean, that's a nice broad question. And I won't say how should companies do it. I'll tell you the companies I've been involved with, how are they doing it? And there are a broad range of companies, all the way from the asset management sector, where it originated from. When I was at Allen Gray and I was an analyst, we actually incorporated ESG into the policy group report, which we essentially wrote to analyze companies. And we would look at companies' business strategies and how that may impact their overall sustainability of their earnings in terms of how they're approaching environmental aspects. So if you think of a Sasol, for example, a Sasol is one of the continent's largest carbon emitters, and they're selling products into markets that are going to punish products that are high carbon content. And so if we didn't see a sustainable strategy on how that particular company was looking to reduce its carbon emissions, we would view the sustainability of its earnings from a place of caution. So that's one way. At the same time, we would look at normal local companies. I sit on the board of one company like Gondwana, for example. Not only is it approaching environmental perspectives from a place of we have to look after the environment because we make a living from it, right? But at the same time, they're looking at it from a sustainability perspective and reducing their overall cost of operation. So they might have solar panels to reduce the cost of their electricity, but they would also be recycling waste just to ensure that the environment in which they thrive, in which they sell and market is great. So depending on what company you are, whether you're an analyst, whether you're a Sasol, whether you're a Gondwana, or even whether you're a Namibia Breweries or an agri-based company in Namibia, which is a country that is arid in nature, is now suffering from more and more erratic rainfall, you would see Namibia Breweries at one point in time shifted its production from Namibia to South Africa because there were water shortages here. So, a lot of what I've just said focuses a lot on water and reducing the cost of your energy bill. But what I'm trying to illustrate is, depending on the company, the environment doesn't just have to be a very green, nice thing. It can be a real sort of impactful thing that changes your profitability profile, and that either attracts or detracts investors as well. And those are companies, but of course their strategies at national levels as well. So that's how I sort of think about the environment.
Yeah, I don't know if I missed, but it sounded as if when we're talking sustainability, we're talking about the sustainability of the organization, and not so much, the sustainability of the environment it operates in.
So think about it. If you are Sasol, and you're emitting a lot of carbon, yes, it will impact the sustainability of your company's profits because your products won't sell. But at the same time, if you don't do anything about that, it will impact your social license to operate, because the country and the people around you in your community will shun you, right? And of course, if you want to think about it over the long term, if you don't deal with your emissions, and you go beyond 1.5, 2 degrees warming, it just makes the place where you do business inhospitable. Okay. So there are multiple, I think, angles in which you can attack the environment. I think this is why I said, for me, as an analyst, as an economic advisor, I'm trying to from an offensive perspective, which is, can you be profitable and look after the environment, versus I want to decrease my emissions to survive or to make sure that the planet doesn't burn down. And I think you might be able to integrate both into your strategy as a company.
Okay. All right. Do you want to add anything to that? Or?
Yeah, I don't really know the Sasol example very well, but I would find that any company which is just emitting carbon as its kind of, that's what it does, I would find that if it hasn't got a long-term plan to reduce that and finally abandon that altogether, then it isn't doing enough. It might be making the right sounds and it's marketing, we've got the right carbon strategies, blah, 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 blah. But I find a lot of the marketing is actually not reaching the net zero goals that we urgently need to attain.
Yeah.
And so carbon emitting companies, I think, are very careful to do their marketing carefully and show that they are doing the right thing. But when it comes down to the bottom line, are they really reducing their carbon emissions, and do they have a goal to finally abandon that form of production? If they're not doing that, then they are not doing enough.
Right. Okay, so on that, I mean, that was going to come later, the whole carbon emission thing.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking Namibia and Namibian companies, is it such a big deal? I mean, it's bad. I know I don't want to get censored for saying that, but the fact that Namibia itself is carbon sink, I think, if I did know right. So we don't emit anything. So how bad is it really?
Yeah. Okay, so we are we contribute a tiny proportion of the world's carbon budget. So in essence, whether we carry on driving our cars or not, it doesn't actually make a big difference. But as part of the global problem, the globe has, our planet Earth has got a real problem in terms of CO2. We are definitely exceeding 1.5 degrees centigrade warming. That's going to unleash all sorts of uncertain climate futures to us. If we don't address that as a matter of urgency, we're all in trouble. So Namibia, even though it's makes a tiny percentage to the contribution of CO2 gases worldwide, we should all be thinking of ways to try and reduce our CO2 emissions as best as possible. Okay, and we've got the best solar resource in the country, which we're not using enough of. So that's a point that I'd like to emphasize tonight.
James would like to hear, because that's why we're doing the whole thing.
Okay, good.
Okay. So, let me just get back to the other questions I wanted to ask. We don't have huge carbon emissions, but what other challenges do we have in terms of the environment in Namibia? People talk about climate change and so on. So what are those things and how do they affect environmental challenges?
I think, as a semi-arid climate, we have a certain amount of a large amount of variability in our resource base. think farmers are really in the forefront of that because they've got to really base their production on is there rain coming this year or not. So that variability in the resource base and in the timing of resources is really important, and that is becoming more and more variable over time through climate change. Okay, so I think Namibia really faces a lot more uncertainty than many other countries, just because we are already semi-arid, and that climate variability is going to get a lot worse in the near future. So I think, we can already see the openings start here of a drought, the opening stages of a drought in Namibia, and I think maybe next year we'll have far below average rain as well. And so the kind of climatic extremes that we experience, the floods and the droughts that we've had in the past, are kind of small in comparison to what we're going to experience in the future. And I think that's going to be a major factor in how we run and do business, because all the productivity which comes from that is going to be more uncertain and more difficult to manage.
Is there something we can do, especially for using ESG and governance of the thing?
Well, okay, so we should be complying with all the environmental laws that we have, and we should be doing our best to try and help people adapt to this uncertain future. Okay, so we should be educating people a lot more to kind of diversify their businesses and to find ways to be self-sufficient in ways which I think we're not doing enough of now. I think we're really vulnerable to these ups and downs that we will see.
Okay. So on that note, I don't know, maybe to ask you, how can businesses align their environmental strategies?
So let's do that, but let's make it a conversation. So there's an audience. I'm sure everyone has the internet. So when you were talking about this, I think one of the things that I'd love the audience online let's Google as we talk. So one of the things that I think we underestimate is how much we are responsible for emissions as households versus industry. So everyone has a lot of burden on businesses to decarbonize, but you Google and you say global emissions for household, they'll say because of the consumption of the range of goods and services that we consume, household sector is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. We contribute more than 60% of emissions as greenhouse gas as emitters, right? So industry is kind of like the other big chunk. So we can focus on industry changing, but if we don't change our consumer behavior, we're not going to achieve it, right? So that's one. Two, one of the things when I got involved in sort of trying to think about economic issues at a country level was, so Namibia is like 0.01% or something, or even less than that, of global emissions. We're a net carbon sink. So then the argument is, well, we shouldn't really do too much about this because it's Germany and Japan and the US. Those are the big emitters, China, India. But what if you could make a business out of helping them reduce their emissions? Because, by the way, if I get to carbon neutral as Namibia, and maybe I am, but they don't, I die anyway. Because the world doesn't say these emissions are coming from Germany and China, so therefore China and Germany will warm up. If we don't fix them, we die. And by the way, because of this amazing sun, maybe by helping them fix them, I make money, which I need because I'm poor, I have 33% unemployment, and I have a crazy Gini coefficient. So when we started looking at it that way, we started viewing the environmental issue as a very different opportunity versus a very different challenge or problem. Okay, so that's one. Second, so Ricardo Hausmann is a professor at Harvard. He put together a course called Green Growth Strategies, which he launched, I think, last year, August. I lectured at that course, and this year, 2 members of the Green Hydrogen program attended the course in March. And in that course, Ricardo studied the Namibian economy for 3 years. In that course, he's come to realize that countries like Namibia, Morocco, Chile, and others are taking an offensive view at dealing with this climate issue, aka saying, because I have space, sun, wind, access to the port, I can create products and solutions that I can sell to Germany, China, India. Like green, but you know, a lot of people talk about green hydrogen. So what is green hydrogen? It is an ingredient amongst others that helps me make ammonia, direct reduced iron, decarbonize cement, build a new shipping industry in Namibia that doesn't exist. But it's actually in the name of reducing the carbon emission of hard to abate sectors. And by the way, by doing this green hydrogen thing, I also produce a lot of electricity that lets me onshore bring energy intensive industries to Namibia that were somewhere else, and there they were using coal, and here they might use renewable electricity, reducing the carbon emissions of that country, but industrializing my country. A practical example. Remember we used to refine zinc in Namibia, in Roshpina, right? Okay, we did. We used to produce some of the finest zinc ingots in the world, 99% purity, used to fetch $100 to $200 a premium a ton. And then we stopped. And no one asked why we stopped. We stopped because the excess electricity we used to get from South Africa, we couldn't get anymore because it was too expensive and South Africa was load shedding. Roshpina at one point in time was 25% of our total country consumption of electricity. Aluminium is something similar. To make aluminium, you smelt the bauxite, very energy intensive industry. So if you don't have electricity, you will lose those industries. So we mothballed our zinc refining capacity in Roshpina. So if you start producing excess clean electricity, you can restart the Roshpina site. You could onshore things like DRI, right? Like direct reduced iron manufacturing. And you can make these clean molecules that then allow you to make methanol, e-kerosene, ammonia, which can help you decarbonize aviation, shipping, and others. So the whole green hydrogen effort is really trying to say, I am a carbon sink, but I need to help fix my more industrialized neighbors. Yeah. And in so doing, I can generate new industries in Namibia. Yeah. Roughly, that's the play. But, you know, I think this mentality in a lot of our emerging market nations that I'd like us to rethink is, because I don't emit, I should be given permission to emit longer. It's called a just energy transition. Let me also emit, just like they did, and they should slow down their emissions faster so that I can emit, because emissions was equated to the source of industrialization. You needed to burn coal and oil to create these industries, to create jobs, to create wealth, and to move up the social mobility at a country scale. And some of us are trying to challenge that by saying, can you industrialize and move up the social mobility scale as a country and leapfrog the carbon-heavy industrial play? And this is revolutionizing how people are thinking about this industrial revolution globally. It's not a Namibia thing. We started it roughly, you know, from an African perspective. Today, there are 10 members of the African Green Hydrogen Alliance from Kenya, Morocco, Egypt, Mauritania, South Africa, and they're all going after, and it's not hydrogen they're after. They're after $1 trillion market share of clean goods or clean industry that is evolving, and it's legislated.
Yeah. Okay, so this is great. No, I'm excited about the green hydrogen thing, and I'm excited about, you know, that we are looking at, you know, clean energies and things like that. But how green is it really? Because I mean, I read that there was a comment, because where you are producing this or where you are getting this done is a very sensitive biodiverse area. So what are we doing about that? Because it's like, yes, we're doing this green thing, but not in such a green way.
Yeah.
Like. So can you just explain that? Maybe?
Absolutely. My favorite topic of the day, that one. So it's very useful to appreciate that. First of all, green hydrogen in Namibia. Yeah? Great. No, we're shouting. So green hydrogen in Namibia is not going to be produced in one place, right? There are 3 hydrogen valleys in Namibia that are envisioned. 3 valleys. So 3 general areas. One is in the southern part of Namibia, another is in the central part of Namibia, and a prospective one is in the northwestern corner of Namibia. These valleys, these areas were identified because of their very high wind resource. We have fairly good solar resource across the country, but you want to couple the two in order to basically make hydrogen as cheaply as you can, right? So that was the first place you started. Where are these areas? The other thing you have to try and do is to place them near ports so that the products that you make have easy access to the world. And then after that, you start digging deeper and deeper. So one of the areas that is of high contention now is in the southern part of Namibia. It's near this place called the Tsalkaheb, the Spiergebied, but it's also part of what one calls the Karoo biome. The Karoo biome starts right from Namibia, goes all the way to South Africa, and it is an area of like high value endemic species, right? So one of the sort of narratives right now is this is a totally protected area. It's super pristine, flowers grow there all the time, and there are no economic activities that take place there at all. And that's not very accurate, right? That area has housed diamond mining for decades, right? Which, by the way, was done as environmentally friendly as we could. That whole park is a multi-use park with various zones mapped as either very sensitive and highly of high ecological value, and other areas that are not as sensitive and are more open to other activities. So today, that area hosts a lot of diamond mining. It hosts multiple, like lots and lots of EPLs, exclusive prospecting licenses. There are people in that area today prospecting for rare earth elements today. They're digging holes, looking for mines, right? One of them, called the Karingara deposit near Namdeb, is pretty huge. It could be a 50-year mine, okay? So know that.
So they're looking at
No, I'm not saying they're meeting. I'm saying let's first deal with it factually, which is it is not a pristine, closed-off area where no activities are taking place. There are roads in there. There's tourism in there right now. That's fine. That whole area is also expected to host at least 4 different wind farms. Okay, Inosan, Diaz, Sterim, and others, 40, 50 megawatts each. That same area is expected to host the Kudu gas power plant, supposed to land in Elizabeth Bay. There's a pipeline that gets built across that area, way to the airport, where a 420 megawatt gas to power plant is being looked to be developed there. As you know, 300 kilometers off that same area, there like gigantic billion-barrel oil finds, and those oil fields will need onshore bases to service them. A lot of those onshore bases, onshore oil service bases, are looking to be developed in and around that area as well. So what the government did, as we saw all these activities coming, we went to the World Bank in February already and started speaking to the IFC on something called Performance Standard 6. So the IFC PS6 says, if you're looking to develop any activity, PS6 will measure how you will exist within an area and respect, its sort of flora and fauna. And if you meet these specific criteria and standards, you will get PS6 accreditation. And that typically allows you to then raise debt, right? So we were in Washington in February already beginning to say, the hydrogen asset could do this, the oil and gas assets could do this, the mining assets could do this. And we then started structuring something called ASSESA, a strategic environmental and social assessment that would say, if all these activities took place there, how could we arrange them in such a manner to minimize the impact on this particular biodiverse area? The one last thing, so by the way, this was February. We launched the terms of reference a couple of weeks ago. And as the government, we're actually discussing what exactly do we need to pause, what do we need to rethink, and how do we arrange these assets or these prospects in such a way that you coexist, right, with the flora and fauna there effectively. The one last thing I'd like to say and hand over to you is, the area isn't small. It is 2 times the size of Qatar.
Wow.
One has to think about that for 2 seconds. It's 24,000 square kilometers. Qatar is like 11,000, that's actually more, it's like 26. Qatar is about 11,000 square kilometers. Some of the comments we have seen would say, it is a no-go area, it must not be touched, there must be no development that must happen there. Which is already false because we've been digging diamonds there for decades. But could you imagine saying to Qatar, you don't have any right to exist, twice over? Because Qatar, before it was developed, also was a pristine environment with kudus, oryxes, and all sorts of things running around. But they were allowed to develop their country and coexist with their oryx. If you look at anywhere around the world, whether it's Germany that's being mentioned, all the way to Netherlands, all the way to Japan, the United States, the US permitted drilling in Alaska. Everyone would try, not everyone, but certainly Namibia is at the forefront of trying to coexist with the environment in a productive and progressive way, while also catering for a community in that area that is pretty impoverished. So how should we, I mean, one of the comments was no development there, you must rather go develop in the Irongo region. So are you saying to people in the Karas region that they don't deserve to be developed, or to have jobs, or for their cities to be mechanized, or for that Lüderitz to evolve, but instead they should all move to Irongo? So as a government, our job and our mission is quite complex, and we have to find a balance between the two, and that's why the CESA is a very important exercise that we're trying to carry out, of course with engagement with civil society, etc. Yeah.
John? Marcel, do you want to add something?
That was quite a...
Is it really...
Okay, so I don't buy everything which James has told us.
Of course.
I think there are huge biodiversity costs in the green hydrogen program, and I worry about the fact that we shouldn't be prepared to incur those costs just to try and solve the world's carbon problem. Obviously the world has got a carbon problem, and we all have to do something about that, but we shouldn't be sacrificing a whole lot of biodiversity to try and solve a CO2 problem worldwide. Well, James has described that we can that it's a large area, and that we can try and site those things carefully so that it does the least biodiversity harm. I think by opening up access to that area, you will allow a whole lot of kind of uncontrolled activities to take place in the area, which can really have a long-term negative impact on the plants. It's an extremely special area in terms of total biodiversity value, endemic plants, endemic invertebrates, endemic reptiles and amphibians. The mining area has been really confined to the coast, which is where there's less of that endemism. So it's difficult to actually avoid those areas altogether. And I think once you start allowing access of large industry in there, all the trucks and the people and so on, which are going to go and construct those wind generators, all the power lines which are going to be there, the factories on site and the factories at the Lüderitz Peninsula, there are enormous environmental costs in that, particularly on the Lüderitz Peninsula, which I think haven't been duly considered yet. I'm pleased you made a note about the Strategic Environmental and Social Assessment, the SESA, because that will really look at the costs and benefits of the total program. And I think it's important that we start identifying alternative areas where we can still generate green hydrogen in the country, but not do it with the same ecological damage that we're about to inflict with the Hyphen project and with other projects in the Southern Corridor Initiative. So certainly I think that the central part of Namibia has also got a good wind resource, and obviously a good solar resource, and there's a lot more infrastructural development already there to actually cater for the enormous growth which will be required around green hydrogen. So I know there's a lot of political drive to try and do this green hydrogen, but I think that it's easy to kind of say that you are doing the right things for the biodiversity, but the long-term toll on the biodiversity for that area will be irreversible, and I see that as largely a fatal flaw for the Tsarkaid National Park.
What about the Kudu gas power?
What about it?
Yeah, I'm not hearing you talk about that at all.
Okay,
It's planned for the same area.
So that will bring power in from the ocean and bring it to a plant which is close to the coast, just 80 kilometers, 100 kilometers up north of Aranyamund, in a fairly homogeneous area of the Tsarkaib National Park. I think targeted size restricted developments of that kind should be allowed to go ahead and should be properly assessed, and then those kind of things can move forward. The green hydrogen development, as I see it, is over a widespread area. It essentially sacrifices the whole of the Tsarkaib National Park over time. Hyphen is at the northern fifth. There'll be 4 more corridors like that. And I just think that is a price that we shouldn't have to pay to solve the world's climate crisis. The climate crisis is a crisis, but we shouldn't be sacrificing biodiversity to try and solve that.
Talking about the ES.
What about the 300 megawatt wind farm that Nampo wants to develop?
Sorry, James, when you're asking that, sorry, give me 1 second. When you're asking that, are you saying those people are also messing up the biodiversity? Because then it sounds like what you said earlier about, the West is messing up with emissions and so on.
What I'm trying to say is, it's unfortunate that folks have chosen to concentrate on this Hyphen project, but they're ignoring a whole bunch of other initiatives that are going on there. So you heard him speak in a lot of detail about Hyphen, how much air it'll take up. I've actually seen the detail about how much land Hyphen would take as a percentage of the total Talcaheb.
And that's an underestimate which Hyphen put out there.
I haven't seen a lot of people talk yet about the 300 megawatt wind farm that Nampo wants to do, or the 50-year rare earth element mine that Namdeb might want to do, or EPL 6691 that is drilling for rare earth in the same area, or the Kudu gas power station, this is why, from a government perspective, we can't choose favorites, and we certainly can't choose to make decisions without doing the studies in a responsible manner. Absolutely. By involving our communities, with our communities, right? So I think for us, we're saying it's a bit premature to say this project will do that, that project will do that. No project is getting permitted before A, the CESA is done at a country level, but B, each project has to do an ESIA, an environmental and strategic impact assessment, on its own. And those projects will need to get permitted individually, right? The second thing I'd like to say is, a lot of what I'm hearing from the environmental community is we're doing this to solve the environmental issues of our neighbors, whether regionally or internationally. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? Because what we're trying to do, not just in that area, but also in the Central Valley or others, is A, we're trying to provide clean electricity for ourselves, jobs for ourselves. We're developing gross fixed capital formation for ourselves. We're trying to develop regional energy security, right? Because if our neighbors are energy insecure, South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and we are not, and we are fine and we are wealthy, say we've got oil or something else, you've seen what happens with South Africa, for example, when Zimbabwe was struggling, right? You will import the weakness of the region in one way or another. So we're looking at regional energy integration, regional energy security, regional enrichment, as well as trading in goods that have a low carbon signature, not to solve their decarbonization problem, but to create opportunities for ourselves. So the way we're looking at it as government is a lot more nuanced and a lot wider than these very specific targeted attacks at projects even before a feasibility study is done. And as government, we think that's a little bit unhealthy, but we will try to do the responsible thing, and we will come to programs like yours and we'll talk about it, and we'd encourage people to come along and do that work with us, look at the studies with us, and then let's make an informed decision as a community and as a country together, versus individuals making decisions on their own on behalf of a whole country, right? Which again we think is a little bit unhealthy.
So I just need to say as well, I mean, we hear, because we are the Namibian Institute of Corporate Governance, and so we want to look at, governance as a
Absolutely.
whole, how we're doing as a nation, are we making the right decisions, and are we, ESG is, are we responsible and sustainable in terms of the environment and social and all of that. And so, the idea is not to, to necessarily point fingers, but is to ensure that actually, we are doing the right thing. We are, making sure that the environmental impacts assessments are done and they are right. So when are those studies going to come? How do we know? And if you are carrying on already, are the studies still busy? Are the results out? What's going to happen? And I think we're running out of time and we're going to open up for questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what's happening?
So all the different projects are on different stages of development.
Okay.
Some of the projects at the coast have already studied the ESIAs. They've been advertised publicly in the newspapers. They've already engaged communities. Hyphen hasn't started its ESIA, for example. Kudu Gas, I don't think, has studied its ESIA yet. The government has put out its terms of reference for the CESA. We're, I think, closing those terms of reference by the end of the month. And we're expecting proposals from various parties around the world to tender to have the right to do that ESIA, to do the CESA in Namibia. So different projects, I mean, the EPLs are drilling for early prospective results. We know that the deposit in Namdeb, we've already seen some prospective results. They're thinking about whether to raise capital. The oil and gas projects are reaching FID sometime, some of them maybe Q1 2025. So each of those projects are being developed on their own timelines. Each of them will have to do an ESIA before they get what we call an ECC, an environmental clearance certificate, for them to start development. So as a government, we're of course looking at all of those aspects in a fair way. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there something you want to add before I open for the audience maybe to ask?
Yeah, okay, no, I'm glad that James has talked about those things, because each of those projects does need the ESIA, the Environmental and Social Impact Assessment, and that's an important part of evaluating whether a project can go ahead or not. My concern is that the underlying trust that we have in the Environmental Management Act to make the right decision. And this is a difficult thing to come into, but I think public generally feels that they don't have much trust in the Environmental Management Act to make decisions in favor of the environment where they are required. Because often, I mean, I've heard people say, I'm an environmental practitioner, I hear this all the time, mining always wins. So where there's an EPL or a mine development or something, there might be huge environmental problems there, but mining always flippin' wins. So there's that underlying mistrust or lack of confidence in the ability of the environmental commissioner to put his foot down and say this problem is fatally flawed on these grounds, and therefore should either not go ahead or should go ahead in a very much reduced fashion or whatever. Because there's a lot of political pressure behind that. And I think this is the forum where we're talking about governance today, to really try and think about how do we make sure that we can put trust in the environmental decisions that we make in this country. We've seen corruption happening in the DEA before, and those sorts of things are indeed worrying. There is a concern about, well, how deep does it go, and can we fully trust the decisions which come out of that department?
What would make you trust? What would give comfort? What do you need to see for the
Well, I think it's going to put people on the spot here, but there have been decisions made by the minister which have overruled what his own staff have said in terms of environmental sensitivity of certain areas and whether projects should go ahead or not. So projects have gone ahead, even where there are fatal flaws in terms of what that project might do to endangered rhino in that area. And those sort of things make people think, well, sure, but if that sort of happens on that scale, how can we trust big decisions around projects with so much political momentum behind them the environment always seems to be the one taking the back seat in those sorts of discussions and being the one that has to make the sacrifices. And I find that saddening and worrying.
We're running out of time. I think I can't see that far. I think we have 5 minutes left. Do we have any comments from the audience and maybe also from the online community? I don't know. We said so many things. I don't know if we've said anything at all. We said much. Are there any questions or comments? Dr. Salom, you want to ask something?
Thanks.
Give us a second. I think the mic is coming. Do we have a roaming mic? Oh, is it fine? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thanks to the panel. My only, I have here all arguments from both. But one thing which I have seen on them over the years, throughout all the mining projects and all the projects coming up, I haven't seen really environmentalists, Namibian environmentalists coming in to bring facts. What I have seen is mostly people coming outside and then they are saying things which doesn't even exist. A person is debating about maybe what is happening in Kavango, but he's never been there, he doesn't know even where is Kavango. My question is, what is the environmental community going to do to give facts, to help to give facts? They are independent people. What are they doing?
Let's get more comments or questions and then we'll address them. Any other questions or comments? And yes, ma'am.
Mike, it's fine. I'm from the Konrad Foundation. Interesting discussion indeed, and also to get some knowledge and insights. Maybe there's one thing one has to be aware of. There will be no industrialization without any touch on the nature. I mean, this discussion reminds me a bit, maybe 20 years back in Europe or Germany, when the first wind turbines been established. And you know, we are very much populated, and there are so many towns and villages in between, and nobody wants to have them. Yeah? Oh, it's going to destroy the birds, and the other one is saying, oh, it's going to influence my own biorhythms, and so forth. Same with the airport. The building or the establishment of the new airport was taking so much time because there were so many discussions and negotiations, and also things that must be handled regarding noise and all these things. No? That's right, that's correct, that all has to be taken into account. But I think we have to make clear to each and everybody that industrialization can't be done without any touch on the nature. The question is the volume, the amount, and the doses of these damages. And maybe also thinking a bit smart, what is the alternative? To say no, thank you, we don't want to have it. I mean, at the moment we are importing electricity from South Africa. First time I went to South Africa some years back, I was really wondering, oh my goodness, all these coal power stations, I don't know if that's the right translation for them. I mean, we know how much damage they do to the nature. And we continue importing this kind of energy, dirty energy. So, as an economist, I'm always asking myself, what is the alternative to what's the potential is? And maybe also to think about one can compensate some things maybe. Of course, they will all the damages on the nature, but the revenues from that new industry can be maybe taken in order also to safely nature on other places in Namibia, yeah, or to give more attention to natural conversations and so forth. That's maybe just my thought, but I would like to stay neutral to this topic. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think our time is probably up. We can still, okay.
Yeah. It's a comment.
Yeah. Sure.
You know what? Namibia is a great country. It has some of the freest press, and we're all allowed to say whatever we want to say, and there are no major consequences to that. I would say this to you as a member of the environmental community. You are very powerful people. You can be. And I would implore that with great power comes great responsibility. I would implore that you be factful and responsible in what you say. You said something now in your statement that, like a lot of the other things I've read, I believe is very unfair and it's useful for you to reflect on it. You say the public has no trust in the environmental commissioner's ability to make sound decisions.
In the environmental management system, yeah.
Right, and you're repeating it now again. Think about that statement for 2 seconds. You speak as if you speak on behalf of the public. The public is a lot of people. It's 3 million of them. And if 3 million people didn't have trust in the environmental commissioner, they have a right to exercise that trust. And they will do so this year in November. And based on all of the elections to date, the public doesn't agree with you. So you have to think hard about whether you speak for everyone in a whole country, everyone in the north, everyone in Ludritz, everyone in every location in Namibia. When you say all of us, for example, I don't agree with you. I'm a member of the public. So when you say the public doesn't have, say some of us don't have. When you say some minister overturned some decisions, perhaps be a bit specific. But what I am saying is, you're a seasoned person in your craft. There are a lot of people watching you. Try and be fair and objective in your comments so that people don't lose faith in what you do, because what you do is very important. And when people see you picking sides and making statements that are not fair, we will start losing trust in something extremely essential in our ecosystem, which is the people who are considered potential environmental stewards of the environment. So that's just the one thing that has worried me over the past 3-4 months, is when I see you guys making statements that are not objective. So that's my only sort of request. Yeah.
I think that goes to all parties, especially if you think governance. We have to be fair, we have to be accountable, responsible, and transparent. So I think in all areas as well, and even with the sustainability studies that are being done, or the environmental impact assessments and all of that, and even when you guys are doing, assessing what the business is doing, I think it's important that everyone, because that is part of good governance, to be fair, to be transparent, and to be responsible in everything that we do. And I feel like it's. Oh, you want to?
I do have to respond.
Yes, okay, sir. Go ahead.
In particular to a question there.
Chop me off when we're done.
So the question from the first question was about environmental facts, and also reflected James's concern. Absolutely, I am not a tree hugger. Obviously, I like trees, but the science that I apply to the environmental decisions that I make is science-based. It is based on what we know about how far that species is distributed, and what sort of habitat requirements it has, and where else it is found, and what other animals it supports, and so on. So all of that comes into the decisions of an environmental scientist, where it's not just emotions with, oh no, we don't want to harm the whatever. Okay, they are objectively made decisions. And in these EIAs that we do, and particularly around the ones in the Tsarkout National Park happening for green hydrogen, there are a lot of world-renowned specialists giving their expertise to those areas. What plants exist there, what invertebrates exist there, what's the geology like, understanding those factors and how those things are linked in an ecosystem approach to understand what is the total impact on that environment. So environmental impact assessments do require specialized expertise where there are high things at risk, high significance items, and they do get that due attention. And my request to you then, stemming from that, those pronouncements must be recognized as they are. And I can give an example of where something was said for the phosphates mining in the offshore mining, where actually the environmental impact assessment said that the phosphate mining was not going to be that damaging to the fisheries, but the public outcry was already a lot more. So in fact, the EIA stated that the phosphate mining was not going to be so damaging, but that was drowned out by a whole lot of other stuff which went on. So So we do try and give our objective opinions, and we make those opinions known through our expertise. I also want to say that when I'm stating that I make decisions pro the environment, that is actually pro people's livelihoods. Everyone in this country and in the world depends on a healthy environment. So when I'm trying to protect environmental features, I'm not just doing it because I like that particular snake or that particular tree. I'm doing it because I'm trying to look after people's livelihoods, which depend on a well-functioning ecosystem. So all the Namibian livelihoods which are out there in rural areas struggling in really difficult situations, and then some mining EPL comes along and wants to override those things or kind of cut out a tourism possibility for them. I say that is wrong, where people are making a decent livelihood from a well-managed ecological resource, and it shouldn't be jeopardized by somebody seeking riches through a mineral resource which may or may not be there. So it's got to be balanced.
Yeah,
We've got to find that balance, and that depends on the governance system functioning properly.
Yes, exactly. So, but it's yeah, it has to be the balance, and it's like what the ma'am here from the Conrad Adenauer, what she said is like, we got to move forward, but we got to see how we're moving forward.
Exactly.
But then who decides that? Who determines that?
So,
where, in terms of what are the levels? Because I know in organizations you have your appetites and your tolerance levels. So, you know, who determines how many snakes?
well, exactly, and that's always a difficult decision to make. When does a flaw in an environment in a program become a fatal flaw? That's a very difficult decision to make.
Yeah.
And I have one last motto to say, that I'm not anti-development. That's often how I'm branded. Oh, John Pallett, he just, it's not that. I want development to happen, but I want it to happen sustainably,
right,
in a way that environment will be looked after in a good way, that in 50 and 100 years' time there's still a healthy environment to help nurture people.
Those thresholds, though, in terms of what would make that more sustainable, like I said, jokingly, but you can't carry on harping on how many snakes. It's a difficult decision. It's always a complicated decision, and each one has to be taken on its merit. What do we lose, and what do we possibly gain? So that's what your studies are doing, all right?
So what I wanted John I was saying, John, talk to her about IFCPS6. Right? How we're going to measure what impact could be had, what mitigating sort of measures various projects can take, how the whole ecosystem must be measured, and then estimates be made on if this happens, what happens to the whole ecosystem. Not just one snake, but the snake eats a rabbit, and if that rabbit has too many babies and there are not enough snakes, you'll get too many rabbits. So they look at the whole ecosystem versus any one species, for example. So this is not gobbledygook that we cannot understand as Namibians. Go ahead and Google IFCPS6. Let's walk the journey together. What the government is trying to say is, let's do it together. So we need a John. Just as we need a Namcor that is being a super progressive oil and gas company that is looking to get into synthetic fuels. Just as we need Jane, who lives in like a shack in Ludwitz, right? And she wants to get out of the shack and start building a project, whether it's a gas to power plant or the Inosan one or a new rare earth element mine. So my plea to especially an organization like the NICG, right? Try and foster real partnership, real authentic, open, transparent camaraderie to really go after sustainable development. So John, come and be a part of the, when we did the call, when we did the CESA, and we did a call, an open call to anyone in the world to call in and comment on the TORs. John wasn't on the call.
I was.
You didn't ask any questions.
No, I didn't answer the questions, but I was there.
You're asking all these questions at the NICG live on the Namibian. Why did you not ask any questions? But did you see that?
Listening.
He was there.
I was listening.
So
I was there.
With John. Yeah. We're doing it with NICG. We're doing it with the people in Ludwitz. We're doing it with everyone, right? And we're saying, guys, come, let's talk about how to develop our country, for all of us, the rats, the snakes, the rabbits, Jane, because the other thing this whole thing was about was companies. We ended up talking about.
Yeah,
Namcor is a company that's transforming. Let's talk about them. Gondwana is a great thing. Nambrus has to shift its water production. We're asking a lot of companies to go to the coast. What's the uranium going to? So while we do the CESA in the Tsakaheb, we're doing one in the Central Valley and in the Northern Valley. And then we're saying to Namibians, let us build our nation that's going to be industrialized, but still puts environmental sustainability at the forefront. It's in our constitution.
Yeah.
So, that's why when people say the public doesn't trust someone, that's unfair, right? Because, didn't we all vote for the constitution? Don't we all vote governments into power? So if we don't trust people and various parties or various institutions, vote for change, right? And if majority of the people vote for a specific ecosystem, it's really hard to say we don't trust that ecosystem. So my final message is, guys, what we're doing today as a Namibian government, if I'm honest, is actually super sophisticated. It's fairly cutting edge. It is quite open and involving in that we're asking people to be a part of it. And I think that's awesome. And I think Namibians should be proud of their government for trying to do various things to change where we are today, to match where our founding cabinet and our forefathers wanted us to be. And we know that, yes, that may come with some sacrifices, but we want to minimize those sacrifices. And I'll tell you this, when I was in Washington speaking to the IFC, we spoke to a lady called Lori-Ann Konzo. Go Google her. She practically wrote the PS6. And in the beginning, they were quite obviously concerned about what we were thinking about doing in that area. And after listening to all of the mitigating measures that were going to be put up, they became quietly actually quite excited, to the extent that they're considering us in assisting the government in rolling out the CESA and potentially even assisting and reviewing all of Hyphen's work along as they do the environmental studies for 2 years. So before we build even one turbine, there'll be 2 years of dealing with people like John and Kalenga and Jane and yourself, right? Where we will go there and map out this area in detail. So for people today to talk about fatal flows, it shouldn't happen, it's too big a sacrifice. John, you're like a super, super respected guy. We have to be fairer than that. So let's walk the 2-year journey together.
Do it together.
If at the end of that journey it's not doable, we don't do it.
Happily ever after.
Right?
That's how we
I'm not saying that.
Come on.
We probably need to wrap this up, but we're talking ESG, and I hope, hopefully, from listening, we understand that at the end of the day, it's really about progression and development, but also taking into consideration all the stakeholders, and in this case, the environmental stakeholders. Adam, do you want to, your final?
No.
30 second.
I have to end on a positive note. That's as long as environmental decisions can be considered in their due right, then I'm happy that the process must roll. The process must continue, and we must do those assessments, and we must do them honestly and thoroughly, and make a balanced decision in the end.
Yeah. And I think that's a wrap, everyone. I don't know if there are any final comments. I think we're done. Our time is up.
By the
Thank you
way,
very much,
I would
everyone.
say this. The environmental issue, today we talked about hydrogen in Tsakaheb, is way, way deeper than this. You should do like a part 2 or something.
it sounds like we need to
where
go
you
part
need
two.
to talk
And
about
even talk about the Paris Agreement
or the
and
financing that can be mobilized,
toxins
etc.
and all the oil and all the things. But yeah, we need to wrap up now at this
Cheers.
point. Thank you so much, and thank you for making my debut.
Yeah.
We're still rolling. Oh, thank you, everyone. Good night.
Cheers. Ciao, ciao.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are we done? Yes? It's a wrap? Oh my goodness.